Leaders Alliance podcast. We're so
Hi,
glad you're with us.
everybody.
And we have some great guests we're going to be presenting to you in just a few minutes. But before we do, we want to just say hello, share a little bit about who we are.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, we're building a network, you guys, of believers all over the world, in the church and outside the church. We have an entrepreneurial vision, which I'm leading out with because our guests today are talking about leading underprivileged people into entrepreneurial success. And that what they're going to be sharing so mirrors what we want to accomplish within Leaders Alliance. We want the 98% of people that find their lives in living outside the walls of the church to be empowered, to be dreaming about what they could be and what they could do to make the world a better place. So you're going to so enjoy them today.
That's so good. Yeah, Leaders Alliance is a global community of kingdom-minded leaders who are focused on actually fulfilling the Great Commission. We want to see the kingdom of God come to earth in a powerful, dynamic way. Jesus said to each one of us that we are called to be salt and light in the earth. In fact, in the first chapter of Revelation, he says that he saved us so that we would be priests and kings to our God.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, every single believer is called to full-time ministry, regardless of where you make your money. Okay. And as Diane said a moment ago, only about 2% will ever make their money behind a pulpit, leading a church. But the majority of believers, every other 98% of all believers, are still called to be world changers. We're still called to affect the planet and to transform our cities and our nations to be more and more aligned with Jesus. So this is really the hope of Leaders Alliance, is to create a partnership between church leaders, marketplace leaders of all kinds, people in education, medicine, business, and so forth, to bring those two things together so that we ultimately create a cross-pollinated, full expression of the body of Christ on earth. So we're grateful to have you with us, to listening to this broadcast. And we're going to go ahead and introduce our guests in just a moment. Diane, do you want to kind of take first shot at it, and I'll go ahead and then follow up?
I mean, they're going to be able to tell their own story today, which is so exciting. But they are just normal people that got inspired by God, and God began to open up doors within their own lives, within the people around them, and within their city, which is Flint, Michigan. And they have made a difference, you guys. Like they're batting 100, batting 1,000, batting 1,000, as the saying goes.
Excellent. Well, so it's Adrian Montague and James Shuttleworth, and they've partnered together to actually bring about a transformation in the city of Flint, Michigan. Flint is one of the most challenged cities in the nation. In fact, I guess 10 years ago, it was the most violent, number one. Now it's been down to 7. And I think partly because of the mobilization that these guys are doing within this amazing nonprofit called Flint Soup. And so could you guys come on, and we're gonna introduce you. Adrian and James, we're so happy that you guys are joining us. And
with names like Montague and Shuttleworth, it's just like you could be a law firm or you could be a romance novel. It's like it could go either way.
Exactly. We're so happy to have you on. And why don't we begin by just hearing a little bite size of sort of your background, your history, just who are you? And Adrian, why don't you start out? Adrian's the director and founder of Flint Soup, but James is her colleague, co-worker. They're a partnership in this process now. So Adrian, why don't you lead off, and then just give us a short little review of who you are, how you ended up kind of doing what you're doing, and then James will ask the same for you.
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me on your podcast. My name is Adrian Montague. I'm the director of Flint Soup. And we microfund small business and startups in our community through a soup dinner where residents come and they bring $5 to participate and be actively involved in the ideas and people that are all around them, and listen to 4 or 5 pre-selected individuals who are changing the fabric of our community, which I'm very excited. And we do this all around breaking bread and having dinner with one another. At the end of the meal, everybody, like I said, is an active participant. So each person has a vote for the person, the idea, or business that they connect with. and we count up all the votes, and the person with the most votes gets every single dollar collected at the door. So we see residents funding residents to pursue their destinies and their calling within their community to shape and mold the future of our city. Um, Going back, like who I am, I am a Michigander. I was born in Flint myself, raised in the suburbs at a very young age. I have to give a little bit of a backstory, right? It's like why my name is Adrian. It really ties into really the work that we're doing currently. And one story that I really don't share, I think, enough, but my family named me Adrian after one of my cousins, and my cousins, her name was Laura Haviland, and her husband started the first underground railroad in the state of Michigan.
Awesome. What
Yeah.
a
Amazing.
heritage.
And so she did the majority of her work in Adrian. So growing up as a little girl, I knew all about the family history and the stories of, generational impact in serving communities, especially the underserved. And that perspective has really changed like how I view leadership and just my role. It's like I knew what God was doing at a very young age within family. And so with her work and her husband, they developed um, the Raisin Institute. And it was the first integrated school between boys and girls in the state, but then the first integrated school between blacks and whites in the nation. She had
Oh,
the highest bounty on her head, and she personally helped herself uh, 200 over 200,000 slaves to freedom during her lifetime. Yeah,
That's
she
incredible.
most of her work with Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass. And but she also understood the component of business as well. So one of the key things that I learned growing up is you not in order to be free in a society, you not only have to be free, but you have to also participate in the economy. And so during that time, there was an outbreak that happened. Her husband died, and a couple of her children passed away. She couldn't sell her house, so she actually demoed it and then sold the land. In Haviland, Kansas, is where she bought up a lot of property. It was renamed after her, after I believe after her death. But she gave recently freed people and families 25 acres to be able to be participants. So
Wow.
growing up, it's like, okay, what is God doing and what is our part? What is my part? It being the next generation, because this is like the third or fourth generation since that God has been doing, or actually more than that at this point, doing things like that. And so I took up the mantle of being a part of the economic freedom and flourishing of my community with Flint Soup, just gathering people together.
Wow, that's so, so good.
what a special story. That's rare in all the earth, even that you know your heritage and can walk in that.
So good. Well, James, why don't you share with us a little bit about your background and how you got involved here?
Yes. So I'm also a native Michigander. I was born in Detroit, but I grew up in a more northern rural Michigan. So very classic Midwestern upbringing. I was homeschooled. My father owned his own business. I don't come from a line of people like Adrian. I come from Irish immigrants and German immigrants. We either worked the land and the farm, or we were teachers. I was the first, probably first generation of ministers that came out of my family. And yeah, I spent some time as a missionary for 5 years, working throughout the world as a non-residential missionary. As we did the gospel crusade, and we did the work where we got to see the glory of God fall in the areas we went. But what we really did was international community health and development. That's what I studied.
Wow.
So we did. I ran medical clinics, and we started orphanages, and we dug wells, usually with our bare hands.
Wow.
And so that was kind of the history of where I came from when I met Adrian. I had come home, and the only thing I knew how to do was drive an ambulance. So I was working as a paramedic in Flint, and we we met on a prayer walk, and I met this woman named Adrian who invited me on this incredible journey, and it's still going.
Wow.
That's so good. Well, Adrian, why don't you give us a bit of the history? How did you and then James coming in, how did you guys begin to envision this transformational movement called Flint Soup?
Sure. So I was in the middle of a career change and I had some free time. And, I was getting out of the political realm because I used to do national campaigns for presidential elections. And it started because I thought that change happened at the highest level. And quickly I realized that actually change happens in the grassroots. So as soon as I realized that, I said, oh, I have to reconfigure. My plan was to be a lobbyist on Capitol Hill, or becoming a constitutional law attorney, which I'm so glad that didn't happen because I so enjoy and love the work that we do today. Um, and so, like, I had this time on my hands, and I was like, God, what would you like me to do? And I stumbled across this blog by Detroit Moxie, and it was her 40th birthday, and it was titled like 40 Things to Do Before You Die in Detroit. And I was like, this is very interesting. Let me take a look at that article and see what was on there. So I just started checking things off the list. I've always loved history, especially Michigan history and post-industrial cities. And so on the list was Detroit Soup. And I started poking around and I started hearing rumblings in the neighborhoods about residents getting together around arts, social justice issues, and meeting up. When I joined, it was above. It was the loft above the Mexican Town Bakery. I believe it was Jessica Hernandez's family that owned it. And so I get to this room with residents, and we were all sitting on the floor, and the tables were actually doors that had been taken down, resting on milk crates. Candles on the table, very bohemian look to it. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I love it. And I was like, I think these are my people. And so for the next 2 years, I was driving down to Detroit 2 or 3 times a week.
Wow.
Just being in the neighborhoods, like getting my hands dirty, building buildings, didn't even know what I was doing, but I was being taught how to do it because I knew shortly that what happens in Detroit happens in my community. There's about a 5 or 6 year lag, but I thought if there are rumblings in the neighborhoods about economic development and entrepreneurship, I want to be on the ground level and understand how ecosystems are built. So I took a lot of time to learn how to do that. Over time, I saw some of the projects not being as sustainable because they were one-time projects. And I thought, well, if we could adopt this model that they adopted from a place in Chicago, what would that look like? How could I inject this kind of thinking in my community in a kingdom way? And then knowing the structure of our own community, I realized that there were, I believe, more nonprofits than for-profit businesses. Flint was known as a place that transformed the world because of GM and the car industry.
Yeah.
We used to export a lot, and we hadn't done that in very long. And I also knew that the residents were communicating three different things. They have ideas, they don't know where to begin. Um, they don't have a network outside of family and friends, and they're really disconnected from the resources. So where are they, and how can we help locate them? And I thought the soup model would actually work around this idea. So, but I don't know anything about business. This is what my thought was. But I was like, but I've seen how it works, and we're really good at connecting with people. So it's like I know the Lord's going to provide. And so we, like, on a whim, at the tail end of a political election, when we're working 20-hour days, we hosted our first Flint Soup. And I brought in all the staffers to take pictures and all this other stuff. And that's how we launched.
Wow,
Um,
that's such an amazing story.
mhm,
So I love the fact that you were able to go to somebody doing something similar and be with them for a season of training. I mean, that's one of the things in
mhm.
Destiny Finder that we recommend for people is that if you have a dream, you have a vision, one of the best ways you can pursue that vision is by taking a little bit of time and being with others who are already pursuing a similar vision. And so, gosh, how did you finally just get the courage to just launch out? Like, what was that like, and what were the first steps of that launch like?
Yeah, I got to a point where I was thinking about it all the time. I was thinking about it more than what I was doing, walking around the city. The thought just consumed me, and I couldn't just shake it. Sometimes you get an idea and you're like, it will stay with you for 1 or 2 weeks, but this one like clung on, and they're like, I'm not leaving you. So like, I was like, oh man, and I had gone back to college. I actually dropped out because I wanted to just get into the working world, but I had gone back and I needed to take a humanities class. So I decided to take a playwriting course. I knew nothing about playwriting. I had never written a play in my life. But in that class, my professor, his name's Andy Morton, I saw him at one of the events and I said, hey, you're a Detroit super too? And I told him about my idea about Flint Soup. And he said, hey, he's like, there's this Share Art Flint grant funded through the Greater Flint's Arts Council, funded by the Ruth Mott Foundation, and they're funding some arts projects. He's like, I think you should apply. I said, I know nothing about writing a grant. He's like, that's okay. He's like, I can help. And I was like, I prayed about it. And I was like, you know what? It's a one pager. I can do this. I simply put something together. I said that the soup dinner was the tapestry of the community and that we were going to be demonstrating the ideas of our surroundings. And 73 people had applied there, and 13, I believe 13 or 14 were awarded the grant. I was one of those people. It was actually really funny. They said, I have no idea what you wrote, but it sounds really cool. So, and then I said, awesome, let's do it.
It
So,
doesn't surprise me that you were in that class because you're a superb
Mhm.
storyteller.
um, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it. So here I was with enough funding to host two soup events,
Wow.
and I didn't really know a lot of the entrepreneurs at that time, and I didn't have a location. And so I humbly went to a local business owner and I said, hey, I see that you close after or at 5 p.m. What do you do with this space after hours? And so we got into a conversation, and she said, yeah, you can host your first soup event here. I said, great. I won't provide any of the pop or juice, and we'll have people, be able to sew back into your business. So the first event, there was probably like 20 people. I was shaking like a leaf. I still don't
Mm.
like public speaking very much. I still get like nervous and anxious, but like there were 4 people like sharing their heart on what they're seeing in the community. The person who won was a local mom who the arts programs had been cut from the local school district. And she said, I've been going in with my own resources, providing art class because that is very foundational for young people. And the community was like, yes, this is amazing. And so she was our first Flint Soup. After the second soup, we had to really decide, like, what does this look like? We have no money. We don't have any spaces. I was like, the only thing we have is prayer. So we're going to pray. And so we prayed, and the Lord simply told us that he was our provider and to believe him for provision. So that's exactly what we did for the next 4 years. And and it was just amazing because people would hear about Flint Soup and they'd want to sew into the ministry, or checks would arrive in the mail at the perfect time,
Wow.
and over 4 years, we had hosted 16 soups.
That's
Now
incredible. And
yeah,
at the soup, you have like several different candidates share about their vision or their dream for launching some kind of either a business or an entrepreneurial expression of some kind. And then you award them a cash prize at the end that's voted on by everybody in the group, correct?
correct, yeah.
So what's that like? I mean, that's that. So give us
Because
a.
initially you got the funding from your grant for the first two.
Yeah.
And then after that, as far as I understand, you try to invite a lot of people. They pay $5 or so. And then all of that money goes towards the person.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And is it usually enough of a seed for them to start something?
yeah, it's enough to get the next piece of licensing, whether it be like a nutritional label or a piece of equipment or extra inventory to get some cash flow. Yeah.
That's excellent. And James, how did you at what point in this process did you engage and start working with Adrian on this project?
So I was invited right from the beginning. As Adrian and I were on that prayer walk where we met, we were just excitedly telling each other kind of about our own hopes and dreams for Flint and what we'd been praying into the city. I think we were actually so excited we may have forgotten to pray actually, but she was sharing about how she wanted to help the city, and I was sharing about my past and how I wanted to be able to kind of use the experience that I had working overseas, doing the same thing in Flint. And I must have given her number because a couple months later, I get this phone call and she says, "Hey, I'm Adrian. I'm the soup person. You said you know how to make soup. Like I'm doing that thing we talked about. I'm doing it. Can you make some soup for me?" And I'm like, yes, I can make soup. And then I hung up and I called my mom and I said, "Mom, how do I make soup?" And so I brought my mom's chicken and rice soup, and I show up at the event, and one of my other friends is there. She must have called him too. He's got a crock pot of soup, and we're like, "What is this about? What are we doing?" And he's like, "I think I need $5. You have $5?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got." Okay, yeah, here we go. And we sat and we watched this, and I'm like, I want to be part of this. This is so amazing. Look at this. And that's kind of how I kind of got in on it. Adrian kept calling me and saying, "Hey, I need some soup. I need some soup." And I was still working as a paramedic. So oftentimes I was like rolling up in an ambulance with my crock pot of soup that I just pulled out of the EMS lounge, like hot. Here you go, $5. Good luck, winner. And then I'm like, I got to call him back. And like, that's how it began with me. And I started bringing soup. And then I noticed that people weren't really sticking around after to kind of break down. And then I started making friends. And Adrian started inviting me to be more and more engaged. And then one day she said, "You know what? Yeah, I've finally been kind of hearing from the Lord. It's kind of time to take this to the next level. I need a co-founder. I need somebody who can actually write. Can you write a grant? I hear you're a writer." And I'm like, "Give me a couple weeks and I can pull a grant together for you." And I pulled together a grant and I said, "How much do you want?" And she's like, "How much do you want? Put down a number and I'll hire you and we'll do this together." And we've been going like that ever since. And we went from being, a really, we're still grassroots, but like grassroots, 15, 30 people in the back of a restaurant, maybe raising $100. Now this year will be 10 years. And when we were doing it live, we were getting 100 people, 112 people. And the last micro grant that we were able to award was over $3,000 to a single individual. So
That's
to
amazing.
see how the Lord was able to grow that just from bringing in crock pots of soup and hearing the hearts of the individuals in our area. It's been amazing.
Yes. Well, when we're able to serve in some capacity, it makes us come alive. And I really know that God put that in our hearts so that we would make a difference in the world. So much of the world is consumed with knowledge. We're always gaining knowledge. We're reading books. We're hearing this. We're doing that. But people have this vacuum of being needed, being wanted, of helping, of making a difference. And I feel like what you're offering on so many levels is a felt need across the whole world.
Yes. No, I think that mutual support dynamic too, that you're engaging people to be part of the solution for one another, is such a powerful thing. So tell us, like, that at a certain point, you guys were able to actually raise enough money to make this your full-time job and to do this on a more consistent level. Tell us about that transition and how has the ministry grown since then?
Sure.
Mm.
No, that's a super like God story, because the second year people started to say, like, you should approach our local funders, the largest one of the largest family foundation in the world, the CS Mott Foundation. And they had actually heard about our event, and they had shown up with their own $5, which is amazing.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so they wanted to know how they could help. And for 3 years, they asked how they can help. But every time we would pray, the Lord would say, "This isn't the year. Just trust me for provision." Even though they were offering their provision, the Lord said, trust me with it." And we said, "Okay." And so we would just simply tell them. We prayed about it again, and the Lord said, "Nope, not this year. So we're trusting Him with provision. I'll see you next year." Keep on
Wow.
coming to our events. And the one thing that I didn't realize, like in hindsight that I see it, was that the Lord wanted us to step into other opportunities during that time, because we were both working at different jobs. James was increasing his skill up into a critical care paramedic. I had worked for one of the larger institutions, Kettering University. I had also landed a position to be the outreach coordinator, helping to develop the master plan for the City of Flint, casting the vision for the next 50 to 100 years.
Oh, man.
Working with, yeah, really, really amazing. That's a total another God story. And then also working for a firm, the Flint Area Reinvestment Office, connecting federal and state resources for economic development. If I would have taken that funding at that time, I would have never been afforded those experiences or the relationships that I would have had during that period, which was so critical to the development of our organization, and the supportive ecosystem that we operate in today.
Mhm.
Wow, that's so incredible. And so finally, you did apply as a grant, I guess, for the Mott Foundation. And how did
Yeah.
that come to pass?
Yeah, they said, "This is the year," and they said, "We don't want you
You're a
working
hard
for
person
anything
to give
else."
away
Yeah.
money to.
Yeah, they said, "This is the year. This is the
Oh, that's
year."
Oh,
amazing. And then,
And
no, go ahead.
oh, yep. So they said, "We want you to focus on this full time." And we were to the point where we just couldn't juggle because
of
there were
course.
like so many more entrepreneurs to be served. So, and I believe, was it 2017? Yeah, 2017. We stepped into it full time, full
That's so
time.
good.
Mhm.
That's so good. And James, you shared a little bit in our members gathering about just how the ministry has grown, and I
Mhm.
guess I call it a ministry, but it's really an official nonprofit organization. But tell us how it's kind of developed, and what some of the stats are.
Yes. So we, aside from the operating expenses that we have, we're essentially given between $5,000 to $7,000 a year to really do the event and do the work that kind of revolves around the building of the community that we do. And so with that $5,000 to $9,000, we're able to host the events, do the outreach that we need to do, and bring in the community so that they can invest their $5 in the entrepreneur. And through those $5 investments, we're able to raise somewhere between 9,000 some years, 16,000 in later years, and just in the $5 bills straight from the community.
Wow.
There's some grant matches that go in
That's
that,
a lot of
and
soup.
That is a lot of soup. Yeah.
so much soup. And yeah, we actually have if we ever have time for it, we have a funny story about the soup. But from so even from that 9,000 or that 16,000 that the community itself is able to invest into their entrepreneurs, as we track our results throughout the year, we see that, I mean, even in 2020, we realized we had crossed the $1 million economic impact point.
So
So
good.
from this amount of money being put in by the community, the impact that it's had is over $1 million. And this is through revenue generated, through sales, through capital campaigns of their own, through being able to go and secure small business loans, or secure maybe win at a larger pitch competition. And we looked last year, and just last year alone, we were able to do $828,000 in economic impact. So the
Yes.
Lord has just been compounding and compounding and just building up the impact that the community has been able to have on its own residents. It's incredibly
Yeah.
humbling.
And
It's
that's with just,
beautiful.
oh, I'm so sorry.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and that's just with 34% reporting out. So we know that number is a lot larger than what's being reported.
Wow.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, give us a couple pictures, like maybe a few of the individuals that you guys have empowered and what's happened as a result of that empowerment that you guys have been able to bring to pass.
Sure. Yeah. So I love sharing the story about his name's Keyshawn Wade. He was one of our youth soup. So we have an adult soup, but we also have a youth soup because we love serving the next generation in tangible ways. And it was actually our least attended soup. So we hosted a soup at Southwestern Classical Academy. And out of 7 youth pitches, there 2 showed up, and it was Keyshawn, his brother, and 2 friends, and another young entrepreneur. And Keyshawn's group actually created the pitch the night before. And so what he had said is, I want to create a socially conscious lawn care company. And he actually won the funds that night. I was actually running around the building to the different organizations. I was like, what are you doing? You're joining us tonight. I don't care what your plans are. You need to, support these youth here. And so what we found out was that he wanted to mow lawns because there's so much blight in the city of Flint. And he said, well, that's the least we can do. He's like, we can get together a lawnmower and some shears to clip bushes and take care of the neighborhoods that we love. And I think a week or 2 weeks into it, he contacts us and he says, I need to return this money because my brother and my friends don't see me as a leader. And this was such a terrible idea. And so we saw that as a teachable moment. And we said, Keyshawn, let's take you out to lunch and let's actually unpack what actually happened. And let's hear your thoughts on the matter. That one lunch turned into several lunches. And what we had come to find out and what we were able to put words to is that he had a heart for economic development within the neighborhoods, doing incremental development through small structures and restructuring infrastructure around the community, which really tied into the work that I was doing previously. So those connections were easily made. And so we just were able to pour into him as a young leader, got to be student government president as well in his school, starting making changes, saving a baccalaureate program, presenting in front of the Flint School Board, which is a very big deal. And 2 years into it, I mean, we really invested a lot of time for 2 years, just seeing him go through the rest of his high school career. And at one of the lunches, I clearly remember him saying, I said, what would you love to do? And he's like, oh man, I'd love to go into Ivy League school. And then he said, and I said, but what? He's like, but I'm just a kid from Flint. And I'm like, what does that mean? Who told you that? And so he went on to say, oh, well, he didn't think that he could do it. And I said, well, get your grades up, start doing community engagement, and I'll teach you how to serve, and that's exactly what he did. A few months from that time, when we had that conversation, he was actually nominated for the Yale Bassett Community Engagement Award through Yale University.
Oh,
Yeah, there was
Good.
972, I think it was juniors at that time, juniors and seniors, I believe, nominated across the US. They had 15 awards. And so what had happened was he said, oh man, he's like, if this is all I get, I am satisfied. And I was like, no way, we're going all the way. We're waiting for that award letter to come in the mail. And we had gotten notified before him that he was one of the 15. I was like dying inside. I was like, I can't wait, and it was beautiful. He was just so overwhelmed that he'd be highlighted with some of the best and brightest, in his class. And And so on his 18th birthday, September 28th, we were able to go with him to Yale University to watch him be honored, which is amazing because we're birthday twins. We share a birthday, so it was the best birthday for me and him. There's stories like that over and over and over that give the Flint community. And he got a full ride to Cornell University, and he's majoring in economic development with the hopes of coming back to a city to continue the work in a professional way.
Wow.
Wow.
What an incredible
I mean,
story.
that's the dream. That's the
Yeah.
book right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, I mean, you think one person, but then the ripple effect of their life is
Yeah.
going to be massive throughout history. It's like, you're changing history one person at a time, and the impact and effect is just going to be felt throughout the nations and about around the world.
Yeah.
So proud of you.
One of the things that you mentioned in our Leaders Alliance group is that you don't just find people and give them money. You actually provide background education and support. Obviously, it sounds like this kid needed special relationship, but you give relationship and access to information and help. Maybe you could unpack that a little bit about what you do there.
Yeah, James, if you wanted to take that question.
Yeah, where would you like me to start with that particular question? Because we have such a huge range of.
You meet someone. I mean, this guy, you met a kid. I'd love to know, well, what's the average socioeconomic background of these people? How do you help them? Obviously, they come and make a pitch. So do they get help even in that? Or once they describe what they need and they get the money, how do you help them implement their ideas?
Yes. So like Adrian said, the first thing we realized was that money was not the thing that they needed the most. When it was just early on and we weren't tracking and we weren't looking at the results the way we are now, the small amount of money would have worked. But now we have been given the responsibility and we've been given the authority to speak into their lives and to be able to really help them grow. So now we really had to step up our game. It's Flint, so in the surrounding area. So it is an urban population. Definitely many people fall below that poverty line, and not just below the poverty line, but it's generationally they've been below this poverty line. And they're very aware of that, and they're very aware that they have an idea and they want to try to be able to get out of that. And we become so many times that first place, that first platform for them to really let their voice be heard. And so, yes, so when we meet someone, we began meeting with them even before we would accept them to the stage. We did accept a few people to the soup stage without meeting them first, and we were like, I think we might need to have a couple more protocols here. That we should meet some people first before we let that happen. So we'd meet with them first, and for some people, it might be a week in advance. It was usually between 3 to 4 months in advance, just to hear their heart, to hear what it is they're trying to do, what it is. I mean, in our minds, in our hearts, we're thinking, what is it that God is trying to do through them and with them? Like, they might not be expressing that themselves. They might not even be believers. We know, like, how is God like really trying to bring impact to this person? And we help them step into that, and we help create a pathway for that. And that simply might be a weekly conversations. It could be on the phone. We make ourselves available even to the late hours of the night. It's not unusual to get a call long after work has ended. If you are an early stage startup entrepreneur, you're definitely working a part-time job. The kids have to be put down. You have to make the lunch. You got to put out the garbage. And 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the evening come along, and it's like, now I can actually sit down and talk to somebody. So to be able, so we offer that, and we do that. And it might be an introduction as we begin speaking with them and hearing more, and start to see their growth. Say, hey, you know what? I think it might be time for an introduction to the maker space in the area. You are a creator. You want to do some small scale manufacturing. We have a maker space. Let's do a tour. Or, oh, you yeah, you need to talk to an expert. Perhaps they understand financial projections, or perhaps you know what we know. We are connected to the Small Business
Wow.
Development Center, or we know somebody who can speak to that. And so it all culminates in they feel they're finally ready, and they take the stage. And so when they're speaking to their community now, they've actually already met the people that are probably in that room with them. And now they're not just saying, hey, I have an idea, and I'm not really surrounded by people that could support me right now. I don't have the network. I don't know the resources. They take the stage, they take the mic, and these are people now who are confident. They have already been connected to a network now. They've probably even maybe tested out their product or tested out their service, and it has made all the difference.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, you're
And then
really
they
growing up the golden people.
absolutely, and it's not easy at times. Some make it easier than others, but you know what, God is in that
Yeah.
that too. And we've gotten to be able to he's gotten to show up in ways that I don't think anybody would have expected. And had it not been as a challenge as it was for some people, maybe they wouldn't have been able to experience the Lord in the way that they did. So.
That's
Yes.
so good. Wow. Thanks for all that clarity too, just about the role you have of both mentoring and connecting people to the resources they need that may not be in your realm of expertise. I mean, I think that's an awesome, service you're providing for people. Let me just ask you this though, where do you see this going? Okay, if you looked into the future 5 years, 10 years, what do you believe the Lord is going to be doing in this coming season?
Yeah, we're seeing more and more people like around the nation and even overseas saying, how can we impact our community in tangible ways? How do we develop, you know, solutions to the challenges that our cities and towns and, even our neighborhoods face? And activating that human capital instead of letting it lay dormant. And we see Lord opening up a lot of different doors. Like even in this past season, James and I were just talking about how the Lord put on our heart to create this cohort during COVID because people couldn't meet together. And it was after a season of significant health challenges for myself. So I had a lot of downtime. And one thing that we realized is that this challenge is faced by many organizations, even our federal government. And during COVID, the Lord really opened up that door to start entering into contracts with the state of Michigan because they love the entrepreneurs and the community and culture that were coming out of Flint Soup. They said we always know Flint Soup entrepreneurs even before they say they're a part of your community because we definitely have a culture to us, in our city. And so we went from just being in Genesee County, and we counted actually this morning right before the call that we're actually in about 36 counties in Michigan, and that was within a year's time, which is exponential acceleration, and we're looking to cover the whole entire state with programming and teaching communities how to connect entrepreneurs and how to connect people to one another. That's one of the biggest things. It's like, how do we create cultures that are productive and flourishing in our own communities while serving and loving each other, but also like being able to do it through the means of business, because I think business is one of the most generous things you can do for a city. It sets the tone of streets, neighborhoods. It creates products and services and jobs, and that's not talked about enough.
Wow.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, one of my friends who's a sort of a prophetic speaker in conferences, they came to the conclusion that the real fruit of revival would be the end of systemic poverty.
Yeah.
In other words, like we
Mm.
can't think of revival, as just an internal passion issue or churches growing or even souls coming to Christ, although those are all important. But
Mhm.
the fact is that ultimately there needs to be a grassroots impact in the overall well-being of any community.
Mhm.
And that's why I love the fact that you're doing what you're doing, because you're actually modeling that. And I know that your model is not just for you, and it's not just for the 36 counties you're in.
Yeah.
I believe it's a model that can be at least imitated at some level in every community around the United States, around the Western world, and even beyond. And
Mhm.
so I just want to say, how if you had a vision for something like this, where would you start? Like, just speaking to the average person who's hearing this podcast and saying, wow, this inspires me. What would be the first step?
Yeah, I would say start asking around for what people are dreaming about. And that's like the most basic thing you can do, because you will be absolutely surprised what people are thinking about and what they're seeing through their lens, because you might not have seen it yourself. And then oftentimes you either know of a resource or know of a person you can connect them with. Because I truly believe that the church should be the most connective body in the entire world, you
Okay.
know?
Mm.
And, and it's so simple to even start, like, at your own home. Just invite people to your home for a dinner and just say, "Let's talk about ideas, and let's throw in our own $5, and maybe the micro grant's only 25 or $30, but that's
Yes.
a start to invest in people. And that idea sharing and that peer-to-peer learning networks are so vital to the development of people. Plus, when you're in a community, you also develop yourself. I can't tell you, I mean, how much James and I have developed just through the aspect of serving our own community. We're not the same people that we were 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and like personally, like I would love to see because there's a huge church planting movement happening, right, in the US and all over. I think that should be a part of the strategic focus. For every church plant, there should be 3 or 4 business plants as well alongside, running
Mm.
alongside.
That's so
Mhm.
'Cause
good.
that's how these things typically grow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that when Michael was a new believer in his late teens, he joined a ministry called Gospel Outreach, and they had businesses within the church.
Yeah.
And he learned how to do vinyl repair, where they could go in to a very
Oh,
expensive car lot, repair a leather seat. They charged $300, but that was cheap for the dealership, or because they would have had to spend 3,000 on that seat. And they developed character, consistency in the young people. And then eventually Michael bought that business, and that funded our ministry in our beginning days. And I think that it's a model that is easily doable, but it's just becoming something that people are aware of. And as I
Yeah.
mentioned before, the idea of the sacred and the secular. Well, what we do at church is sacred. What we do outside of church is secular. When actually we're made in the image of God, and what we do in our day-to-day lives represents God. And so why not bring that, if you're a mom at home, be a priest in your own home unto your children. And if you're in the business world, do the same. If you're a teacher. And I believe that this is the beginning of a reformation in these areas, that business becomes also sacred,
yeah.
because business
Mhm.
people are also the people that have the funding to be able to support missions and entrepreneurial services. And so that we got somehow into this mindset that they need to be separate has actually not been beneficial.
Mhm.
But I know leaders all around the world are very open to change. And ministries and pastors and churches are usually really underfunded. And I think that this is also one of the reasons for that. There's a mutual symbiosis and mutual benefit that needs to take place by all of us getting out of financial insecurity and instability and into a stable place, so that we can affect people's lives and the economies of the earth.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Now let me steer you in one more question. I like, about half of our audience are pastors,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the other half are marketplace leaders, people doing something similar to what you're doing, or people that are involved in different aspects of missions or revival ministry of different kinds. What would you say to pastors? In other words, most pastors are kind of like struggling under the tyranny of the urgent. They have their budgets, they have their buildings, they have their programs, and most pastors are like a little bit overwhelmed.
Mhm.
But then when they hear something like what you guys are talking about with Flint Soup, they just say, "Wow, I wish I had 100 people like you in my church."
Mhm.
How can a pastor facilitate what you're doing and help to really put wind in your sails if they encounter people like you? What should the pastor be thinking? What should he be doing?
Mhm.
Sure. I think the answer is quite simple. When it comes to, a pastor saying, "Oh, I wish there was like 100 people, like that in my church." My answer is, actually, you do. You do have those people. You
Right.
just haven't asked the question, right?
Wow.
And like I can't tell you how many believers engage with us also in Flint Soup as well. And it's shocking to me to hear that they've been sitting on these ideas for 6, 7, 8, 10 years.
Mhm.
But I think they were like me when I was little. I was telling James this earlier too. We talk about stuff all the time. Like I think for me, having the inclination towards business, but not being able to articulate exactly what I was longing, like that apostolic, the gifting, nobody could articulate that for me. But like, I was waiting for my pastor to give me permission in the way that I needed to hear it, and over time, I just realized that that wasn't gonna happen, right? In the way that I needed to hear it.
Yeah.
And so, I think a lot of people are in that place, or they don't feel like that they have the support, because their community is the church community, and that's their primary community, and they don't have connections maybe outside to the economic service support providers that help support that. Even just getting to know your service support providers in your own local community to help bridge that gap would be incredibly beneficial.
Wow.
We're also seeing in other
Mhm.
denominations, it just blew my mind. I was talking to this one guy, James and I were, and I said, "Oh, so you're a pastor at your church. Well, what are you, the family life pastor, or are you the associate pastor?" And he laughed and he said, "No, I'm the business pastor." I was like, "You're the what?" You
Oh,
know? And
yeah.
he's like, "Well, yeah." He's like, and he has an MBA, and he's also has a pastoral as well. Um, and he said, "Well, majority of my congregation works or is business people, so I actually disciple them, but I could also help them with their business plan and their cash flow in the same time because that
Wow.
pops up quite a bit."
Wow.
So there's a lot of different denominations that are doing really innovative things within their congregation
So
just to be able to be a supportive service. And I
good.
thought that was amazing.
That's so good. And that's one of
Yeah.
the things that we're trying to create and trusting the Lord for within Leaders Alliance, because
Yeah.
so often we have to reinvent the wheel. We expect in that scenario, most people expect the pastor to know everything and to be
Sure.
able to equip everyone in every position.
Mhm.
Where in a biblical framework, he's supposed to equip others to be
Yeah.
pastors. And what you're talking about, an apostolic vision, which is um, the oversight, the blueprint, all of that often is contained within the business people within our
Yeah.
fellowship. And they can have greater vision for our church, but also equipping others within the business community. So within Leaders Alliance, we're opening up the grid, and we're trying to create a sense of like linked in a spiritual dynamic where we can come to a local site, get involved on whatever level we want in community, but we can view like what happened with you and Mike Frank this morning. It's like a
Yeah.
major business community person saying, "I'll help you." And I just believe it's not only us trying to do this, but like you said, ministries around the world are saying, why isn't what we've done and the model we've used in the past working by and large in a more powerful way? And so people are looking for tools and answers. And I honestly see what you guys doing as a prototype for, like, in a global way. Like, let's do Michigan, and then there's 50 more states, and then there's continents, and
That's so good.
because what you're experiencing is so valuable in a very large scale.
Excellent. Well, we need to wrap up, you guys, and we could just be talking about this
We
stuff all
could.
day long. But James, any final words that you have to the listener who's on today and saying, wow, I'm inspired, but I don't know what to do? Maybe a pastor who's saying, I know I have 100 people in my church right now, but I don't know how to mobilize them. Any thoughts you have about that as we wrap up? And then obviously, Adrian, we want to hear from you as well. So.
Mhm. Yeah, where I started, being one of the 100 people in the congregation and being blessed enough to be under a pastor who recognized that and then empowered me to go and live my dream, see that dream and that destiny come into play. Just the kingdom of God is waiting to break into the lives of each person that you're meeting. And I'm becoming more and more and more aware of it. The more and more we work with people from so many different ranges and backgrounds. Like every single time there's a moment to not just say, can I pray for you? Or, oh, I hear that's going on in your life. Like the Spirit of God is ready and waiting to give you that word and say, hey, I can't tell you how many times we said, hey, there's something on your face right now. I can see the pain. Like, can we pray for you? Can we lay hands? Like in the middle of Panera Bread, and they say, "What have you done to me?" Oh, it's gone. The pain. And people notice that, and I've become aware of it in every single conversation we have. The kingdom of God is just ready to break into somebody's life in a way that they've never seen it before, and then it adds proof. It adds the truth to what you had just been sharing with them, and it grows from there. That would be my encouragement.
That's beautiful.
Excellent.
Beautifully said.
And that is the wedding of the supernatural and the super practical together.
Yeah.
So Adrian, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, when it comes to, pastors, like I would just say, really listen to what people are thinking about and talking about. Because most often you can really identify who's thinking big picture and quickly identify like what's really on the hearts and minds of the people that you're engaging. And what they're thinking about, or even just simply ask. I mean, for us, we're always asking, it's like, what have you been thinking about? Or what have you been, or just asking, like, teach me something new. You would be so surprised what people are talking about or teaching themselves. It's like, oh, you're actually creating a new dish, or actually you're playing around with programming and you're developing a new technology. Talk to me more about this. So that teach me something new always really highlights passion.
So good.
Amen. Well, one of our, as we wrap up, I just want you to know, Leaders Alliance exists to foster your dream. It exists to actually provide an environment within which, like a greenhouse, within which the dreams and the seeds of God's guidance in your life can grow and prosper. And so we want to invite you to actually tune in, subscribe to our YouTube, but also, really consider becoming a member and joining us, because we're meeting every week. We're providing amazing speakers just like Adrian and James. And we're ultimately, our passion is to ignite the body of Christ in every different sphere to be the representers of Jesus in this world around us in a powerful way. So please consider joining us. Adrian, could you just close with a word of prayer and just release a blessing on everybody listening, and then we'll end our call.
Sure. Oh, Lord, thank you so much for this time with Leaders Alliance and every single member that had been on the call and the leadership that's leading this incredible movement. Lord, I just pray that you just give us wisdom as we go into the weeks ahead. And Lord, highlight people that are all around us that are dreaming of new ways to impact people, love, their cities in a new and tangible and deeper way. And God, give us the resources and people to connect with to move down that continuum. I
Yeah.
ask this in your name, Jesus, and I thank you for all the good things that you're bestowing upon us in this season. In the name of Jesus, Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you,
Amen.
James. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Adrian. So good to have you on this call.
Thank you
And
so much.
God bless everything you're doing.
Yeah, come
Thank
on.
you.
Take care.
Okay.
Thank
Bless
you.
you. Bye-bye,
You
everyone.
Bye bye.